The planet was never meant for comfort. Zera's surface stretched in endless shades of rust and ochre, its skies stained by an orange sun that offered light but little warmth. Wind carried dust across the plains like a second skin, grinding against metal, choking engines, settling into every pore. Water wasn't just scarce here, it was currency, power, survival. The corporation knew that. They built their stronghold over the only reliable wells, rationing out each drop while promising progress. The Shen clan Zera's native inhabitants saw it differently. To them, the springs weren't resources. They were sacred, tied to memory and tradition. Caught in the middle of that tension was Jake Rowan. Jake hadn't come to Zara to take sides. He wanted quiet, a small workshop, and enough routine to keep the ghosts of his past at bay. His hands, scarred from both war and machinery, spent their days coaxing life out of battered engine, patching cracked holes, and bargaining with scavengers for parts. For a while, that felt like enough, but Zara had a way of pulling people into conflict. And for Jake, neutrality was only going to last so long. Jake had worn a uniform once. The war on Ganymede 7 had stripped him of more than sleep. It had left him with the memory of cities burning and the sound of men screaming through broken comms. He carried medals he never asked for and guilt he could never wash away. When the war ended, he didn't go home. He couldn't. The thought of returning to familiar streets, of facing the families of soldiers who hadn't come back, felt unbearable. Instead, he drifted station to station, job to job, staying just long enough to earn credits before moving on. Zara wasn't supposed to be different. It was supposed to be another stop, another dusty backwater, where he could lose himself in machines instead of memories. And for a time, it worked. He found a workshop near the trade hub where scavengers dragged in half-dead transports and miners begged him to keep their lifelines running. Jake fixed what others would have scrapped, welding broken frames, improvising parts from junk, keeping people moving in a place where nothing stood still. In his quieter hours, he tinkered with a personal project, an old shuttle he'd salvaged, a patchwork of parts from half a dozen different crafts. He told himself that one day, when the repairs were done, he'd leave Zara behind, find somewhere quieter, somewhere the war couldn't follow. But that was the lie he kept telling himself. The truth was, Jake wasn't running anymore. He was hiding. He avoided the bars where mercenaries swapped stories of skirmishes and contracts. He kept out of disputes between locals and corporate enforcers. He didn't ask questions when Shen traders arrived with relics wrapped in cloth, whispering in a language he only half understood. Every choice he made was about staying invisible. But invisibility on Zera was fragile. The corporation's grip was tightening. Their shipments of water grew smaller, prices higher. The Shen clan's patience thinned with every insult to their traditions. And Jake, mechanic, outsider, soldier turned civilian, was fixing machines for both sides without realizing he was becoming part of the equation. There were nights he sat on the roof of his workshop, looking out at the horizon where dust storms swallowed the land. The sky would burn orange and red, and he'd think of Ganymede, the war, the blood, the mistakes he couldn't undo. He'd promised himself he'd never fight again, never raise a weapon, never be the reason someone didn't walk away. But promises are brittle things on a world like Zara, and Jake Rowan's was about to break. The first sign of trouble wasn't loud. It never was. It came in shortages, the kind that slipped into daily life like sand through fingers. A shipment of water delayed. A ration cut smaller than last week. A guard at the checkpoint who suddenly wanted more than just a token of goodwill. On Zera, scarcity wasn't an accident, it was a tool. The corporation called it management, the Shen called it theft. Jake called it inevitable. He saw it from his workshop window. The lines outside the distribution towers stretched longer each day, miners and settlers standing shoulder to shoulder with Shen villagers, faces burned by the sun, lips cracked from thirst. Enforcers in polished armor watched from the shadows, rifles slung low, daring anyone to test their patience. Jake kept his head down. When a water hauler broke down, he fixed it. When a Shen trader brought in a farming drone with failing servos, he fixed that too. Credits were credits. He didn't ask questions, and most didn't offer answers, but neutrality doesn't hold up when both sides are looking for leverage. One evening Lyra walked into his workshop. The air changed the moment she stepped inside, silent, sharp, like the pause before a blade strikes. She carried herself like someone who expected the world to move aside, shoulders squared, hand never far from the hilt strapped to her back. Her eyes, dark and steady, swept across the cluttered tables, the half-repaired machines, and finally landed on Jake. "You fix things," she said, not a question. Jake didn't look up from the carburetor he was cleaning. "That's the sign outside." You'll fix this. She set down a drone unit Shen design, elegant but worn, its casing carved with markings that were more than decoration. Jake recognized it instantly. A scout model. Faster than anything the corporation used. Built to read the land in ways machines weren't supposed to. It had no business being here. In the hands of a warrior with eyes that looked like judgment given form, he sighed. Where'd you find it? Her silence was answer enough. Jake got to work. For hours he dismantled and rewired, hands moving on instinct, his mind racing ahead of his words. Lyra stayed, leaning against the doorframe, watching him with the kind of patience that didn't feel like patience at all. She asked nothing, offered nothing. But when he handed the drone back, humming like it hadn't in years, she gave him the smallest nod. Not gratitude, acknowledgement, and then she left. The next day corporation enforcers came through. 3 of them, armor gleaming despite the dust, boots heavy against the workshop floor. Henderson had Auntie sent them personally. He rarely dirtied his shoes, but Jake could feel the man's fingerprints all over the visit. You've been busy, one of the enforcers said, picking up a wrench like it was evidence. Locals say you've been working with the Shen. Jake wiped his hands on a rag. I work with whoever pays. Machines don't care who owns them. The enforcer smiled without warmth. Machines don't start uprisings, people do. They left without breaking anything, but the message was clear. The corporation was watching. Jake spent that night on the roof again, staring at the horizon. The wind was stronger, carrying whispers of storm. He told himself it was none of his business. That the Shen had their ways, the corporation had theirs, and he wasn't about to be the rope in their tug-of-war. But Lyra returned 2 nights later. This time, she didn't bring a broken drone. She brought a warning. They will force you to choose, she said simply. And when they do, there will be no going back. Jake wanted to laugh, wanted to tell her she had the wrong man, that he was done choosing sides. But the look in her eyes told him she wasn't guessing. She was certain, and deep down he feared she was right. The arena wasn't a place. Not really. It was a clearing cut into the hard red earth, ringed by torches that spat smoke into the dusk. Miners, settlers, Shen villagers, and corporation enforcers gathered in a rough circle. The crowd pressed tight, restless. To most, it was spectacle. To some, it was justice. To Jake Rowan, it was a mistake. He stood at the edge of the circle, hands empty, heart heavy. This isn't my fight, he muttered. But Henderson's voice carried over the murmurs, smooth and practiced. The people deserve resolution. Tensions cannot linger in whispers. Let it be settled openly by strength, by will. The crowd stirred, half believing, half afraid to disagree. Henderson smiled the way only men with power smiled, like he'd already won. Lyra stepped into the circle opposite Jake. She looked carved from stone, her blade slung across her back, her posture a quiet declaration. She didn't glare, didn't sneer. She simply waited, the silence around her as sharp as steel. Jake wanted to walk away. Every instinct screamed at him to turn, to shove past the enforcers and vanish into the stormlit horizon. But the rifles at his back said otherwise. Henderson hadn't offered choice. He'd offered theater, a duel for balance, for peace. He'd called it. But Jake knew better. This was Henderson tightening the leash on both sides, making an example out of a mechanic who'd strayed too close to neutrality. The crowd parted. A Shen elder stepped forward, his voice carrying a weight that even Henderson's smooth rhetoric couldn't match. By trial of blood and spirit, the elder intoned, balance shall be tested. Warrior against warrior, mercy or death, chosen by the victor. Jake's jaw clenched. I'm not a warrior. Lyra's gaze met his. For a heartbeat, something flickered there, not contempt, not pity, but the faintest recognition of the man standing opposite her. Then it was gone. The elder's hand fell. Begin. Lyra moved first. Her blade swept free in a single motion, metal catching torchlight as she closed the distance. Jake barely had time to raise his arms before the strike came, controlled, precise, aimed not to kill but to test. Sparks leaped as steel kissed the wrench. Jake snatched from his belt, the clash jolting through his arms. He staggered back. Lyra pressed forward. Each strike was deliberate, every movement honed through years of training. Jake blocked, deflected, retreated, his breath ragged. He wasn't trained for this anymore. He'd buried those instincts on Ganymede with the rest of his ghosts. But muscle remembered what the mind tried to forget. She feinted left. He caught it. She pivoted, the blade arcing low. He stumbled aside, dirt kicking up around his boots. The crowd roared, some cheering her precision, others jeering his clumsy defense. Jake gritted his teeth. This wasn't a fight he could win. Not against her, not against the expectations of the crowd. His only chance was to survive. Lyra's strikes came faster. One nicked his arm, drawing blood. Another tore fabric from his sleeve. Each cut was a message. She was holding back, testing, measuring. "Why are you doing this?" Jake hissed between blows. Her eyes didn't waver. "Because I must." The answer hit harder than her blade. The fight stretched on, a dance of grit and inevitability. Jake's arms shook from the strain, sweat cutting paths through the dust on his face. He blocked high, ducked low, swung wild with the wrench. Lyra deflected with ease, her movements efficient, her breath steady. Then she pressed harder. A strike across his shoulder sent him reeling. Another across his ribs dropped him to one knee. The world narrowed to pain, dust, and the cold realization that Henderson had engineered this, not for balance, but for spectacle. One more reminder that power wasn't earned on zero. It was staged. The crowd leaned in, their voices swelling. "Finish it," some shouted. "End him." Lyra raised her blade. Jake lifted his eyes, breath ragged, chest burning. He saw no cruelty in her face, no hunger for blood, only duty, and something in him broke. Not the kind of break that shatters, the kind that bends, the kind that remembers. On Ganymede, he had fought to survive. Here he fought to live. He surged forward, wrench clashing against steel, his movements raw, desperate, unrefined. Lyra adjusted, surprised by the sudden resistance. He blocked one strike, ducked another, drove forward with a force that wasn't skill but sheer refusal to fall. The wrench slipped. Her blade pressed against his chest, angled just enough. The crowd held its breath. Jake closed his eyes. "Do it." Silence. Then steel shifted. When he opened his eyes, the blade wasn't moving downward. It was trembling. Faint lines glowed across the metal, runes long dormant flickering alive, where his blood touched the blade. Light spread like veins of fire. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Shen voices rose in awe. Henderson's smile faltered. Lyra pulled the blade back, staring at the runes now blazing with impossible energy. Her chest rose and fell, steady but shaken. The elder stepped forward, eyes wide with something between fear and reverence. "The blood, it awakens." The torchlight dimmed against the glow of the blade. The crowd knelt. Shen voices murmured words Jake didn't understand but felt in his bones. Lyra lowered her weapon. Slowly, deliberately, she bowed her head. Jake staggered, clutching his wound, breath heavy. He didn't feel like a victor. He felt like a man shoved into a story he wanted no part of. Henderson's eyes, though, told a different story. Calculating, hungry, a man already spinning this miracle into profit. Jake wanted none of it. But as the elder's voice rose above the crowd, declaring prophecy, destiny, and the blood of the first ones, he knew there was no walking away. Not anymore. The night after the duel stretched endless. Jake sat in the Shen sanctuary, a cavern carved into stone and lit by fires that flickered against walls painted with centuries of memory. Shadows danced across murals of battles, migrations, and figures holding blades not unlike the one that had nearly ended him hours before. The blade now lay across an altar, glowing faintly, runes pulsing like a heartbeat. Every time Jake looked at it, unease coiled in his gut. It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was something alive. Lyra stood nearby, silent, her expression unreadable. She hadn't spoken since the duel, neither had Jake. Too much had happened, too much had shifted in a single clash. It was the elder who finally broke the silence. "You have done what no Shen has done in generations," he said, voice heavy with reverence. "The blade has answered you." Jake shook his head. "I didn't do anything. I was bleeding, losing, that's all." The elder's gaze didn't waver. "Blood speaks when words fail. It recognized you." Jake let out a bitter laugh. "Recognized me? I'm nobody. I fix machines. I'm not your chosen anything." The elder stepped closer, pointing to the murals. "Long before the corporation, long before settlers came, our people carried blades that sang with light. They were gifts of the first one's beings who shaped the stars. But when greed spread, the blades fell silent. Until now." Jake looked away, his throat dry. Destiny was just another word people used to drag others into wars. He'd seen enough of that. Lyra finally spoke, her voice steady but softer than before. "Whether you believe it or not, the blade believes you. That makes you part of this." Jake wanted to argue, but the weight in her tone stilled him. The elder gestured, and Tishen lifted a small chest onto the altar beside the blade. Its surface was ancient, etched with symbols that echoed those glowing on the weapon. With careful hands, the elder opened it. Inside lay a cube, no larger than Jake's fist. Black as obsidian, its edges shimmered faintly, as if reality bent around it. The elder whispered words in the old tongue, and the cube lifted, hovering in the air. At first, Jake thought it was a trick of the firelight, then the cube split, shifting, unfolding like gears within gears. A beam of light shot upward, scattering across the cavern ceiling, stars, an entire map, constellations, sprawling, shifting, aligning. At its center burned a point of brilliance, so bright it cast shadows on the faces below. Jake's chest tightened. He'd seen maps like this in war briefings, but never one that felt alive. This wasn't projection. This was memory, ancient and deliberate. The elder's voice was hushed with awe. The path of the first ones. The blade is the key, and you are the bearer. Jake stared at the star burning at the center. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the blade, as his own heartbeat. I don't want this, he whispered. Want is irrelevant, the elder replied. The cube has awakened because of you. The map responds to you. This is bigger than any one man's choice. Lyra stepped closer, her eyes fixed on him. Do you think I wanted this either? To carry tradition, to be bound to prophecy. We don't choose, we endure. Her words cut through him sharper than her blade had. The revelation spread quickly. Within days, whispers of the awakened blade and the living map reached every corner of the settlement. Shen spoke of renewal, of destiny fulfilled. The corporation, however, saw something else entirely: power. Henderson visited Jake's workshop under the guise of civility. He wore his usual smile, polished and dangerous. His eyes, though, betrayed the hunger gnawing beneath. A remarkable event, Henderson said smoothly, glancing at the repaired engines scattered across the shop. A mechanic, chosen by destiny. Who would have thought? Jake didn't look up from the shuttle part in his hands. I'm not chosen. I'm cornered. Semantics, Henderson replied with a shrug. Does Shen think you're their savior? I think you're an opportunity. That cube though stars, it's a map, isn't it? To something greater than wells and dust. Jake's grip tightened on the wrench. Whatever it is, it's not yours. Henderson chuckled. Not yet. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. But think about this. Out there beyond Zera, there's more than survival. There's power enough to change everything, to stop wars before they start, to make men like me irrelevant. Jake finally met his eyes. That's exactly why you'll never have it. Henderson's smile thinned, but he didn't push. He never pushed. He planted seeds and let others do the watering. When he left, the silence of the workshop felt heavier than the storm outside. Jake sat alone, the image of the star map burning in his mind. The cube, the blade, the prophesy, it was all a weight he hadn't asked for, and yet it clung to him like shadow. He'd run from wars before. He'd promised never to fight again. But Zera wasn't going to let him run, not this time. The storm broke at dawn. It rolled in from the horizon, a wall of black clouds and fire-colored lightning that swallowed the sky. Winds howled through the settlement, tearing banners loose, rattling shutters. To most, it was just another Zera storm, violent, merciless, survivable. But Jake knew better. This storm wasn't chance. It was timing. Henderson's timing. By the time Jake reached the outskirts of the square, the scene was already unraveling. Enforcers in gleaming armor stood in ranks, rifles trained not outward but inward, and the Shen, who had gathered with their elders and warriors. Between them stood Henderson, hands raised in mock authority, his voice carrying over the chaos. For too long, Henderson declared, division has weakened us. The corporation offers unity, order, a future beyond these barren sands. But the Shen cling to myths, to false hope in ancient blades. He gestured toward Jake, who was shoved forward by two enforcers. The crowd shifted, whispers swelling. Henderson's smile widened. Here is your proof, he said. A so-called bearer, a mechanic, an outsider. Do you truly believe destiny favors him? Or is it time we cast aside superstition and build a future with our own hands? The enforcers raised their rifles. The Shen raised their blades. The storm above cracked open, lightning spearing the earth. Jake's chest tightened. He'd seen this before on Ganymede, on other worlds. The moment when words dissolved and blood took their place. And once again, he was in the middle. Lyra broke the silence. She stepped into the square, blade drawn, its runes glowing brighter in the light. Her voice cut through Henderson's speech like steel through cloth. You call it myth because you fear it, she said. But the blade has chosen, and the map has awakened. No lie can bury truth. The Shen roared their approval, their voices rising above the storm. Henderson's smile faltered, but only for a breath. Then let truth be tested, he snapped. He thrust a hand upward. The enforcers opened fire. Chaos exploded. Energy bolts scorched the ground. Torches toppled. The crowd scattered. Shen warriors clashed with armored soldiers, steel against rifles, faith against control. The storm swallowed it all, thunder rolling like drums of war. Jake ducked behind a broken cart, his heart pounding. He wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at him to vanish into the storm, to leave Zera behind like every battlefield before it. But then he saw Lyra. She fought like the storm itself, fluid, unyielding, her blade flashing arcs of light as it cut through rifle barrels and armor plates. For every strike, another Shen rallied, their courage ignited by her defiance. And Henderson.com, amid the chaos, watched it all with the cold calculation of a man already writing the outcome in his head. Jake's fists clenched. Running wasn't an option, not anymore. He surged from cover, wrench in hand, and slammed it into the back of an enforcer's helmet. The soldier dropped. Jake grabbed the rifle, fired at another, then turned toward Lyra. "Need a hand?" he shouted. She didn't answer, but her eyes flicked toward him acknowledgement, not surprise. Together they pressed forward through the melee. The blade's glow intensified with every clash, runes blazing like molten veins. Jake felt its pull, the strange rhythm syncing with his heartbeat. It wasn't just Lyra's weapon anymore, it was calling him. Henderson saw it too. His mask slipped, greed flashing raw across his face. He barked an order, and two enforcers charged. Lyra met one, her blade a blur. The other leveled a rifle at her back. Jake didn't think he moved. The blade met his hand as if it had been waiting. The moment his fingers wrapped around the hilt, light roared outward, a surge of energy that dropped the enforcer where he stood. The storm above cracked wider, lightning striking in rhythm with the blade's glow. The crowd froze. Even Henderson staggered back, his confidence shaken for the first time. Jake stood, breath ragged, the blade burning in his grip. Its weight wasn't just steel, it was history, memory, power. He wasn't trained for it, but it felt like it was training him. Lyra's voice carried over the stunned silence. "The blade has chosen twice. There is no denying it now." The Shen rallied, enforcers faltered. Henderson's control unraveled. He shouted orders, desperate, his voice drowned by thunder. Then, seeing the tide turning, he did what men like him always did. He retreated. When the storm finally passed, the square lay in ruin. Smoke curled from shattered walls. Bodies lay scattered, and the air smelled of ozone and blood. But the Shen stood victorious, their voices raised in weary triumph. Jake lowered the blade, its glow dimming but not extinguishing. He stared at it, chest heaving, mind reeling. He hadn't wanted this, he still didn't, but he couldn't deny what had happened. Lyra approached, her face streaked with dust and blood, her eyes steady. "You can keep running from yourself," she said quietly, "but you can't run from this. The blade has bound you to us." Jake swallowed hard. "And if I don't want it, then it will break you," she said simply. "Or it will break everything else." Her words lingered as the Shen carried their wounded and tended their fallen. Henderson was gone, but not defeated. He would return, hungrier, more dangerous. Jake knew the fight wasn't over. It was only beginning, and for the first time in years, he didn't turn away. The storm left silence in its wake. Zera's sky cleared slow, bruised clouds rolling away to reveal stars sharp against the black. The settlement smoldered, torches guttering in the damp air, walls scorched where lightning had split stone. People moved like ghosts among the ruins, tending wounds, lifting bodies, whispering names of the fallen. Jake sat alone on the steps of the sanctuary, the blade resting across his knees. Its glow had faded to a dull ember, as if even it needed rest. He ran a hand along the etched runes, tracing their grooves like scars. He'd carried scars before, but none that hummed with history. Lyra found him there. She stood for a long time without speaking, her gaze fixed on the horizon where Henderson had fled. "He'll be back," she said finally. Jake nodded. "Men like him always come back." She sat beside him, setting her own blade against the step. For once her posture wasn't that of a warrior. She looked tired, human. "You fought when you could have run," she said. "That matters." Jake gave a dry laugh. "I've been running most of my life. Guess I just ran out of places." Lyra studied him. "Maybe you finally ran to where you were meant to be." The words sat heavy between them. Destiny, prophecy, he still hated the weight of those ideas. But as he looked at the blade, as he remembered the cube unfolding into starlight, he felt something stir. Not belief. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. The Shen held a gathering that night. Fires lit the square. Voices rose in chants that blended grief with defiance. They honored the dead, celebrated survival, and vowed that Zera would not bow to the corporation. Jake stood apart, watching. He didn't belong in their rituals, didn't share their faith. But when the elder approached, laying a hand on his shoulder, the crowd's gaze followed. "The blade has bound you to us," the elder said, "not as savior, not as master, as bearer. You carry what was lost. You remind us that balance can return." Jake shifted uncomfortably under the weight of so many eyes. "I don't know if I can live up to that." The elder smiled faintly. "No one does, until they try." The crowd bowed their heads not to him, but to the symbol he carried. And Jake, for the first time since Ganymede, didn't turn away. Later, as the fires burned low, Jake found himself staring at the night sky. The cube's map haunted his mind, that central star pulsing brighter than all the rest. A path, a promise, or a warning. Lyra joined him again, silent until the quiet became comfortable. "You'll leave, won't you?" she asked. Jake exhaled, slow. "If the map leads to what the Shen believe, Henderson won't stop hunting it. He won't stop hunting me. And if I stay here, neither will peace." Lyra nodded, as if she had expected the answer. "Then I'll go with you." He turned, surprised. "You carry the blade," she said simply. "But I carry the vow. Neither of us walks this path alone." For the first time in days, Jake almost smiled. When dawn came again, it brought no storm, just the stillness of a world waiting. Jake stood by the half-repaired shuttle, the blade strapped across his back, the cube secure in his pack. Lyra checked supplies with the quiet efficiency of someone who had already decided the journey ahead was hers as much as his. The Shen gathered to see them off, chanting blessings in voices that carried across the dry wind. The elder raised a hand, his words firm. "Find what was lost, return what was taken, restore what was broken." Jake looked once more at the settlement, at the people who had made him more than a ghost of wars past. He felt the blade hum against his back, steady and alive. Then he climbed into the shuttle. Lyra followed. Engines flared, dust rose, and the ship lifted into the rising light. Ahead lay stars, questions, and Henderson's shadow. Jake didn't know if he believed in prophecy, but for the first time, he wasn't running from it. He was flying toward it.